They stole my idea, then fired me, so I watched it burn from the outside. The first thing you need to know about me is that I can smell a lie before it hits your lips. Maybe it's from growing up with a grandmother who read tea leaves and a mother who could sense a fever 3 days before it broke, but I've always been able to taste the truth in things. That's probably why I knew something was different about the way Miles Richardson looked at me that Tuesday morning in October, when the Seattle rain was doing that thing where it's not quite mist, not quite drops, just hanging in the air like unfinished thoughts. I was behind the espresso machine at Brew Theory, same as I'd been every morning for the past 8 months, but today felt charged with possibility. The coffee shop was still empty except for the usual early birds, tech bros with their laptops, and that woman who always ordered a triple shot Cortadou and sat by the window, typing furiously like she was writing the next great American novel. My name is Simone Washington, and at 26, I was supposed to have it all figured out by now. At least, that's what my college friends kept posting on Instagram with their engagement rings and corporate headshots. But here I was, pulling shots at 5:47 a.m., and honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Not yet, anyway. See, Brew Theory wasn't just any coffee shop. Miles had opened it 3 years ago with this vision of creating a third space for conscious living, whatever that meant. The walls were covered in reclaimed wood, succulents hung from macrame planters, and everything was painted in shades of sage green and cream. It attracted the kind of customers who paid $7 for oat milk lattes and talked about their chakras while scrolling through their phones. But what nobody knew, not even Miles, not at first, was what I was really doing during those quiet morning hours before the shop filled up. I'd started small, a pinch of turmeric in my own coffee, then ashwagandha powder mixed into the steamed milk of regular customers who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. Nothing crazy, nothing that would hurt anyone. Just little experiments based on the things my grandmother had taught me before she passed, mixed with everything I'd learned from my obsessive late-night research into functional mushrooms and adaptogens. My grandmother, Mama Celia, used to say that healing wasn't about fixing what was broken, it was about remembering what was already whole. She'd grown up in rural Alabama, learning about plants and roots from women who learned from their grandmothers, who learned from theirs, going back generations. When I was little, she'd let me help her make tonics in her kitchen, explaining how ginger could settle more than just your stomach, how certain mushrooms could help your body remember how to be strong. "Baby girl," she'd say, grinding herbs with her mortar and pestle, "every plant is a conversation between the earth and your body. You just got to learn how to listen." After she died during my junior year of college, I threw myself into studying everything I could about traditional medicine, ethnobotany, and the science behind ancient healing practices. My anthropology professors thought I was preparing for graduate school. Really, I was trying to hear her voice again. So when I started working at Brew Theory, it felt like fate. Here was this space that supposedly celebrated wellness and consciousness, but all they really offered were overpriced coffee drinks with fancy names. I saw an opportunity to actually help people, even if they didn't know that's what was happening. It started with Mrs. Chen, who came in every Tuesday and Thursday, always looking exhausted and mentioning her brain fog. I began adding a tiny amount of lion's mane mushroom powder to her usual cappuccino. 2 weeks later, she was telling me how much clearer she felt, how she'd finally been able to finish the novel she'd been struggling with for months. Then there was Marcus, the freelance graphic designer, who was constantly stressed about deadlines. I started making him what I privately called a chill pill latte. Espresso with a carefully measured blend of ashwagandha and reishi mushroom, sweetened with raw honey and a dash of cinnamon. Within a month, he was joking about how he'd found his zen, how he wasn't lying awake at 3 a.m. anymore worrying about client revisions. Word started spreading in that organic way things do in Seattle. People would come in asking for whatever Simone's making or requesting that special drink that made me feel so good last time. I never advertised what I was doing, never made official claims about health benefits. I just listened to what people needed and created something that might help. The drink that changed everything was what I privately called Rooted Gold. It started as an experiment for myself during a particularly dark Seattle winter. I was dealing with my own anxiety about the future, feeling stuck between the life I thought I should want and the one I actually craved. So I created this beautiful golden tonic, turmeric and ginger as the base, with cordyceps mushroom for energy, a touch of black pepper to help absorption, and coconut milk to make it creamy and comforting. I added a tiny bit of raw honey and a pinch of cardamom that reminded me of Mama Celia's kitchen. The first time I made it for a customer instead of just myself, it was for this woman who came in looking absolutely defeated. She'd just started fertility treatments, she told me, and everything felt overwhelming and hopeless. I handed her the warm, golden drink and watched her face change after the first sip. "What is this?" she asked, and there were actual tears in her eyes. "It tastes like hope." I knew I was onto something special. Miles first noticed what I was doing on a rainy Thursday morning in early October. He'd been doing inventory in the back office, but I caught him watching me through the doorway as I prepared a custom drink for one of my regulars. I was in my element, measuring out adaptogenic powders with the precision of a pharmacist, layering flavors like I was composing music, talking softly to the customer about how the drink might make them feel. When the customer left with a smile and a promise to see you tomorrow, Simone, Miles approached the counter with this expression I'd never seen before. Not quite surprise, not quite curiosity, more like recognition. "How long have you been doing that?" he asked, nodding toward the empty cup and the small containers of powders I was cleaning up. I felt my cheeks warm. Doing what? Making those custom drinks. I've been noticing more and more customers asking for the Simone Special or requesting modifications that aren't on our menu. This was it. This conversation I'd been both hoping for and dreading. I took a deep breath, smelling the familiar mixture of espresso and possibility in the air. "A few months," I admitted. "Nothing crazy, just some adaptogens and functional mushrooms. Stuff that's totally safe, things people have been using for thousands of years. I've done my research, I promise." Instead of the lecture or firing I expected, Miles leaned against the counter with genuine interest. "Tell me more." For the next 20 minutes, while the morning rush was still an hour away, I found myself explaining everything. My grandmother's teachings, my research into traditional healing practices, the way I'd been quietly helping customers feel better without them even realizing why. I showed him my notebook where I kept track of which adaptogens worked best for different issues, my carefully researched sourcing for the highest quality mushroom powders, the feedback I'd been collecting from customers. Miles listened to every word, occasionally asking questions that showed he was actually understanding what I was talking about. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring at the espresso machine like it held answers. "Simone," he said finally, "what you're describing, this is exactly what Brew Theory should be. This is the vision I had when I opened this place, but I never knew how to actually implement it." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" "I mean you've created something real here. Something that actually helps people, not just talks about helping people. This isn't just coffee anymore, it's medicine. It's community. It's..." He paused, searching for words. "It's authentic." That word hung in the air between us like incense. Authentic. I'd spent so many years feeling like I was pretending to be someone else, first in college trying to fit into academic spaces that felt too small for everything I carried, then in various jobs that paid the bills but left my soul hungry. But here, behind this espresso machine, mixing ancient wisdom with modern life, I finally felt like myself. "The thing is," Miles continued, lowering his voice even though we were still alone, "my girlfriend Tasha is really into the wellness space. She's got like 60,000 followers on Instagram, always posting about functional mushrooms and adaptogens and all that. She's been trying to get me to add more wellness-focused items to the menu, but I never knew where to start." I nodded, though something about the way he mentioned his girlfriend made my stomach tighten slightly. I'd seen Tasha a few times, always perfectly dressed in athleisure, always taking photos of her drinks, always talking loudly about her latest cleanse or superfood discovery. She was beautiful in that effortless way that probably took hours of effort, and she clearly knew how to work a room. "Maybe," Miles said, and I could see him working through an idea in real time. "Maybe you could show her what you're doing. She's coming in later today. Would you be willing to make her one of your special drinks? I think she'd be really interested in your approach." This felt like a moment that could change everything. Standing there in the pre-dawn quiet of Brew Theory, With the smell of coffee and possibility surrounding us, I made a choice that would alter the entire trajectory of my life. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'd love to." Miles smiled, really smiled, for the first time since I'd started working there. "Perfect. And Simone? Thank you for trusting me with this. What you're doing here, it's special. It deserves to be shared with the world." As he walked back to his office, I busied myself with opening tasks, but my mind was racing. This was it. This was the break I'd been hoping for, without even knowing I was hoping for it. Someone with vision and resources had finally seen what I was capable of, and they wanted to help me share it with the world. I spent the rest of my shift planning what I would make for Tasha, imagining the conversations we might have about healing and wellness and the power of plants. I picture myself finally being seen not just as the girl behind the espresso machine, but as someone with knowledge worth sharing, someone with gifts worth nurturing. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed that morning. The way Miles's eyes lit up not when I talked about helping people, but when I mentioned my research and my secret recipes. The way he immediately thought about his girlfriend's social media presence instead of the customers I was already serving. The way he called what I was doing special and said it deserved to be shared with the world, like it was something that belonged to him to share. But in that moment, I only heard what I wanted to hear. I only saw what I needed to see. And maybe that's exactly what they were counting on. The universe has a funny way of giving you exactly what you ask for, just not in the way you expected. That Tuesday morning, I asked for recognition, for partnership, for a chance to turn my quiet experiments into something bigger. I had no idea I was actually asking for the biggest lesson of my life. Tasha Morris arrived at Brew Theory, like she owned the place, which in a way, I guess she did. Her blonde hair was perfectly tousled in that way that screams, "I woke up like this," but probably took 40 minutes and 3 different products. She wore cream-colored leggings that probably cost more than my rent, an oversized sweater that looked casually expensive, and carried a water bottle covered in wellness brand stickers like badges of honor. "Babe," she called out to Miles, who practically lit up when he saw her. I watched from behind the espresso machine as she kissed his cheek, leaving just a hint of glossy lipstick behind. "I'm so excited to try this mystery drink you've been texting me about all morning." Miles gestured toward me with the pride of someone showing off a prized possession. "Tasha, meet Simone. She's the genius I was telling you about." Genius. The word made my chest warm with something I wasn't used to feeling at work, validation. Tasha turned her full attention to me, and I immediately understood why she had 60,000 followers. She had this way of looking at you like you were the most fascinating person in the room, like every word you were about to say might change her life. "Miles has been raving about your creations," she said, leaning against the counter with genuine interest. "I have to admit, I'm kind of obsessed with functional wellness. I've been trying to get this 1 inch," she nudged Miles playfully, "to expand beyond basic coffee drinks for months." "What would you like to try?" I asked, my hands already moving toward my collection of powders and tinctures. "Surprise me," she said. "I trust your intuition. Miles says you have a gift." I decided to make her the rooted gold, but elevated. I pulled a double shot of our single-origin Ethiopian espresso, steamed coconut milk to the perfect temperature, then began the alchemy I'd perfected over months of experimentation. Turmeric and ginger for the base, cordyceps for energy, a touch of reishi for calm focus, black pepper for absorption, raw honey for sweetness, and a whisper of cardamom that would remind anyone with taste buds of their grandmother's kitchen. As I worked, I explained each ingredient, sharing the research I'd done, the traditional uses, the way different adaptogens worked synergistically. Tasha listened with the intensity of someone taking mental notes, occasionally asking questions that showed she actually understood what I was talking about. When I handed her the golden drink, topped with a light dusting of cinnamon, she took a sip and her eyes literally closed in pleasure. "Oh my God," she breathed. "This is incredible. It's like warm sunlight in a cup. I can actually feel it working." She took another sip, then another. "Miles, this is exactly what we've been talking about. This is the future. Right?" Miles said, and I noticed he said we, like they were already business partners. "Simone's been developing this whole line of functional drinks. People are obsessed with them. A whole line? Tasha's eyes widened. What else do you have? For the next hour, as the coffee shop filled with its usual morning crowd, I found myself in the most exciting conversation of my professional life. I made Tasha 3 more drinks: my Clarity blend with lion's mane and ginkgo, my Stress Less combination with ashwagandha and tulsi, and my Dream State evening tonic with passion flower and magnesium. With each drink, she became more animated, more enthusiastic. She started taking photos, not the selfie-style shots I expected, but careful, artistic images of the drinks themselves. She asked about sourcing, about dosages, about the stories behind each blend. This isn't just coffee, she said finally, setting down the empty cup from the Dream State tonic. This is medicine. This is wellness that actually works instead of just looking pretty on Instagram. That's when Miles dropped the bomb that would change everything. What if we didn't have to keep this as just a coffee shop secret? He said, looking between Tasha and me. What if we could scale this? Turn it into a real product line? My heart stopped. What do you mean? I mean bottled versions. Powder blends people can take home. A whole brew theory wellness line based on your formulas. His eyes were bright with the kind of excitement I'd only seen him show about profit margins before. Tasha's got the platform to launch it, I've got the business connections to distribute it, and you've got the knowledge to make it authentic. We could call it something like Roots and Rituals, Tasha added, already deep in vision mode. Honor the traditional aspects while making it accessible to modern wellness consumers. I can already see the Instagram campaigns. They started talking faster, bouncing ideas off each other about packaging and marketing and distribution channels. I felt swept up in their enthusiasm, but also slightly out of breath, like I was trying to keep up with a conversation happening in a language I only half understood. The thing is, Miles said, turning back to me, we need your full involvement. Not just the recipes, but the story behind them, the authenticity. Would you be interested in developing this with us? Would I be interested? I'd spent 8 months creating these drinks in quiet anonymity, hoping someone would notice they were special. Now 2 people with actual business experience and marketing reach were offering to help me share them with the world. Yes, I said without hesitation. Absolutely yes. Perfect. Tasha clapped her hands together. This is going to be amazing. Simone, would you be able to put together a creative brief for us? Nothing too formal, just your thoughts on the direction, maybe some packaging ideas, marketing angles that feel authentic to your vision. Of course, I said, already mentally organizing everything I wanted to share with them. Great. Let's meet tomorrow after your shift. We can brainstorm in the back office where it's quieter. Miles was already pulling up his calendar on his phone. This is going to be huge, Simone. I can feel it. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. working on the creative brief. I wrote about my grandmother's teachings, about the importance of honoring traditional plant medicine while making it accessible to modern consumers. I sketched packaging ideas that would reflect the earthy, authentic nature of the products. I outlined marketing messages that focused on genuine wellness rather than superficial trends. I researched suppliers for organic, ethically sourced ingredients. I designed a whole product line. Not just the 4 drinks I'd shown them, but seasonal blends, concentrated powders, even a line of ceremonial drinking vessels. I wrote copy that told the story of each blend, connecting ancient wisdom to contemporary science. By the time I finally fell asleep, I had created a 20-page document that represented months of knowledge, creativity, and passion. I was so excited to share it that I could barely concentrate during my shift the next day. The meeting was everything I'd hoped for, and more. Miles and Tasha pored over every page of my brief, praising my insights, asking thoughtful questions, building on my ideas with their own expertise. For 2 hours, I felt like a true collaborator, a valued partner in something that could actually change people's lives. This is incredible work, Simone, Tasha said as we wrapped up. You've basically created a business plan for us. I have some connections at wellness trade shows who would be very interested in something like this. The only thing, Miles added, and something in his tone made me pay closer attention, is that we might need to adjust some of the messaging. Make it a little more mainstream accessible. Some of this traditional medicine language might alienate customers who are newer to wellness. I felt a small knot form in my stomach, but I pushed it down. Of course, they'd need to make adjustments. They knew the business side better than I did. "Whatever you think is best," I said. "I trust your judgment." Famous last words. 3 weeks passed without another meeting. Every time I asked Miles about the next steps for our product line, he'd give me vague responses about reviewing a brief with some industry contacts or waiting for feedback from potential investors. Tasha stopped coming into the shop during my shifts, which should have been my first red flag, but I convinced myself she was just busy with her influencer work. I threw myself into perfecting the formulas, testing new combinations during my morning prep time, documenting everything in detailed notes that I planned to share with them once we got the green light. I even started sourcing sample packaging materials with my own money, so excited about our partnership that I couldn't wait for the official budget approval. That's why it hit me like a physical blow when I saw the Instagram post. I was scrolling through my feed during my lunch break on a rainy Thursday afternoon when Tasha's face filled my screen. She was glowing, holding an elegant glass bottle filled with golden liquid that looked exactly like my Rooted Gold tonic. The caption made my blood turn to ice water. So excited to announce my collaboration with Brew Theory Seattle. Glowing Star introducing Roots and Rituals, a revolutionary line of functional wellness beverages that honor ancient healing traditions while meeting modern needs. These aren't just drinks, they're medicine in a bottle. Sparkles. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through the carousel of images. There was my Clarity Blend, now called Mental Focus Elixir. My Stress-Less combination, rebranded as Calm and Centered Tonic. My Dream State Evening Drink, now Nighttime Ritual Blend. Every single formula I'd spent months perfecting, every carefully researched ingredient ratio, every story I'd shared about my grandmother's teachings, all of it packaged in sleek bottles with minimalist labels that screamed expensive wellness brand. The worst part wasn't even seeing my recipes stolen. It was reading the caption that claimed these drinks were inspired by Tasha's deep dive into ethnobotany and traditional plant medicine. My grandmother's stories, rewritten as her spiritual journey. My research, presented as her expertise. My heart, bottled and sold with someone else's name on the label. I screenshotted everything with trembling fingers, then called Miles immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him, "We need to talk now." No response. I tried calling the shop's main line, but when Jake, the afternoon shift manager, answered, he said Miles was in meetings all day and couldn't be disturbed. That evening, I waited outside Brew Theory until Miles arrived for his usual after-hours inventory check. When he saw me standing by his car, his face went carefully blank in a way that told me everything I needed to know. "Simone, what's up?" "What's up?" I held up my phone, showing him the Instagram post. "Miles, these are my formulas. My recipes. We were supposed to be partners in this." He glanced at the screen, then back at my face with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, almost amused. "Look, I think there's been some confusion here." "Confusion?" My voice cracked. "You asked me to write a creative brief. You said we were building this together. Right, and we appreciated your input as a Brew Theory employee. But Simone, you were never officially part of the product development team. Tasha and I have been working on this concept for months before you even started experimenting with those drinks." The gaslighting was so smooth, so confident, that for a moment, I actually doubted my own memory. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when he first tasted my Rooted Gold, the excitement in his voice when he talked about scaling my formulas, the way Tasha had praised my incredible work just 3 weeks ago. "You're lying," I said quietly. "Those are my exact recipes, Miles. The turmeric ginger cordyceps combination in specific ratios that I spent weeks perfecting. The cardamom signature that I told you came from my grandmother's kitchen. You even used the names I suggested. Roots and Rituals was my idea." He shrugged. "Common ingredients, common concepts. The wellness industry is pretty saturated with turmeric drinks, Simone. You can't claim ownership over ancient plant medicine." The casual cruelty of it left me speechless. This man I trusted with my most precious knowledge, who I thought saw me as a valuable collaborator, was now standing in a parking lot explaining to me why my own grandmother's teachings didn't belong to me. "I have documentation," I said desperately. "The creative brief I wrote, the emails about our meetings, the creative brief you wrote as part of your job duties at Brew Theory," he interrupted, "which technically makes any ideas in it property of the company. But don't worry, we're not planning to make this a legal issue or anything." The threat was delivered with a smile, but it was unmistakably a threat. I went home that night and cried until my eyes swelled shut. Then I called in sick the next day and spent it researching intellectual property law, hoping to find some legal recourse. But Miles was right. I'd been an employee when I wrote the brief. I'd never filed any patents or trademarks, and proving the timeline of who created what first would be nearly impossible without resources I didn't have. When I finally returned to work, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Miles barely acknowledged me. The other employees seemed awkward around me, like they'd been told something but weren't sure what. I caught Jake whispering into his phone by the office door. "Yeah, she's been acting really weird lately. Miles thinks she might be having some kind of breakdown." The final blow came exactly 1 week after the Instagram post. I was in the middle of my morning shift when Miles approached the counter with a piece of paper and an expression of fake concern. "Simone, we need to talk. I received a very serious complaint from a customer yesterday about your behavior." He showed me a typed letter claiming that I'd been pushy and inappropriate about my unauthorized drink modifications, that I'd made a customer feel unsafe by insisting they try ingredients they hadn't requested, and that I'd become increasingly unstable and confrontational when they declined. I stared at the letter, recognizing none of the details, remembering no such interaction. The customer's name meant nothing to me. The incident described sounded like something that had never happened to someone I'd never met. "This is fabricated," I said. "Miles, you know this isn't true. You know how I interact with customers." "I know you've been under a lot of stress lately," he said with practiced sympathy. "And I understand you might be feeling some resentment about the product line. But we can't have employees who make customers uncomfortable, especially with unauthorized food modifications. I'm sorry, Simone, but I have to let you go." I was escorted out immediately, still wearing my apron, my hands still smelling like espresso and cardamom. 8 months of work, trust, and friendship ended with a security guard watching me collect my belongings from a locker that suddenly felt like evidence of a life I'd imagined. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by all my research notes, my carefully documented recipes, my grandmother's mortar and pestle, and felt something I'd never experienced before, a grief so complete it seemed to hollow out my bones. They hadn't just stolen my work. They'd erased me from my own story, made me disappear from my own dreams. Shame and anger and heartbreak mixed in my chest like spoiled milk, curdling everything I'd thought I knew about trust, about partnership, about my own worth. I'd given them everything, my knowledge, my creativity, my hope, and they'd used it to build something beautiful, then locked me out of my own creation. For the first time since my grandmother died, I felt truly, completely alone. The first 2 weeks after getting fired were the darkest of my adult life. I barely left my apartment, surviving on ramen noodles and the kind of despair that makes you forget to shower. My unemployment benefits hadn't kicked in yet, and my savings were disappearing faster than morning fog in Seattle. Every time I opened Instagram and saw another post about roots and rituals, now apparently selling out at high-end wellness boutiques across the Pacific Northwest, I felt like I was being stabbed with my own knife. But rock bottom has a funny way of becoming bedrock if you let it. On a Sunday morning when the rain had finally stopped and sunlight was streaming through my dirty windows, my phone rang. Aunt Jackie's name lit up the screen, and I almost didn't answer. I hadn't talked to my family since getting fired, too ashamed to admit how completely I'd been played. "Baby girl," her voice was warm maple syrup over gravel, exactly like Mama Celia's had been. "I've been having dreams about you. Bad ones. You need to come home." Jackie Washington Brown ran a soul food kitchen called Roots and Wings in the Central District, the historically black neighborhood where I'd grown up before gentrification started pushing families like ours to the outskirts. She'd opened it 5 years ago after retiring from nursing, saying she wanted to feed people's bodies and souls the way her mother, my grandmother, had taught her. I tried to make excuses, but Aunt Jackie had the same gift Mama Celia had for seeing through bullshit. Simone Marie Washington, she said, using my full name the way only family can. Get your behind down here this Sunday. I'm making Mama's cornbread, and we're going to talk. That Sunday, I found myself sitting in the warm, cluttered kitchen of Roots and Wings, surrounded by cast iron pans and the smell of collard greens simmering with ham hocks. The restaurant was closed on Sundays, but the kitchen was alive with the kind of energy that happens when food is made with love instead of profit. I told Jackie everything. About the drinks I'd created, about Miles and Tasha's betrayal, about seeing my grandmother's healing wisdom packaged and sold by people who'd never known hunger or struggle, or the particular kind of strength that gets passed down through generations of Black women who made magic out of necessity. Jackie listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making the kind of soft sounds that let you know you're being heard. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, stirring a pot of something that smelled like home. "You know what your mistake was?" she finally said. I braced myself for a lecture about being naive or trusting the wrong people. "You tried to fit your medicine into their container," she continued. "Mama Celia's wisdom, your grandmother's gifts, our family's knowledge, you tried to shrink it down to fit into their white wellness world. But baby, some things aren't meant to be shrunk." She turned to face me, and I saw Mama Celia's eyes looking back at me. "What if instead of trying to join their table, you built your own?" That's how the Sunday pop-up started. The first one was supposed to be just for family and friends, a small gathering where I could practice my tonics again without the pressure of profit margins or marketing strategies. I set up a folding table in the corner of Roots and Wings dining room, arranged my collection of mason jars filled with healing powders, and waited to see who would show up. Word traveled the way it does in tight communities, through church networks and community college bulletin boards and conversations at bus stops. By the third Sunday, I had a line of people waiting to try what I was calling Earthblood, drinks that honored the Earth's medicine and the blood memory of healing that ran through my family. I didn't just serve drinks. I told stories. About Mama Celia gathering herbs in Alabama soil, about the women who taught her, about plants that remembered how to heal long before pharmaceutical companies started putting price tags on wellness. I talked about adaptogens not as trendy superfoods, but as allies that had been supporting human resilience for thousands of years. This isn't about optimization, I'd say, handing someone a warm cup of my heart-opening blend, hawthorn rose hips, and cacao mixed with oat milk and honey. This is about remembering. Your body already knows how to heal. These plants are just reminding it. People didn't just drink my tonics, they lingered. They asked questions about their grandmother's remedies, shared stories about their own healing journeys, created the kind of community I'd been searching for without knowing it. Unlike the sterile Instagram wellness that Tasha promoted, this felt alive, messy, real. The breakthrough came when Keisha Williams from the Black Wellness Collective showed up on my fifth Sunday. She was a naturopathic doctor who'd been building community around culturally rooted healing practices, and she sat quietly in the corner for 2 hours, watching me work and listening to the conversations flowing around my little station. "This is medicine," she told me as I was packing up. "Not just the drinks, but what you're creating here. The storytelling, the community building, the reclaiming of ancestral knowledge. Would you be interested in being featured in our newsletter?" The newsletter piece changed everything. Titled Reclaiming Our Roots, Young Herbalist Honors Ancestral Wisdom While Building Community, it brought people from across the city to my Sunday pop-ups. More importantly, it caught the attention of the Rainier Valley Community Development Fund, which offered small grants to projects that strengthened community resilience. I applied for their microgrant program with shaking hands, describing Earthblood not as a business venture, but as a community healing project. When they called to tell me I'd been awarded $5,000 to support my work, I cried right there on the phone. "We love what you're doing," the program director said. "This kind of grassroots community wellness is exactly what our neighborhoods need." That night, I sat in Aunt Jackie's kitchen planning what I could do with the grant money. Not fancy packaging or social media campaigns, but real infrastructure, better equipment, higher quality ingredients, a way to serve more people who needed healing but couldn't afford boutique wellness prices. You know what the difference is between what you're doing and what they did? Jackie asked, kneading dough for the next day's cornbread. What? They took your recipes, but they couldn't take your roots. They got the formula, but they missed the medicine. And baby, the medicine was never in the mushrooms, it was in you. As I watched her hands work the dough with the same practiced love I'd seen in Mama Celia's hands, I understood something that had been hidden from me during those months at Brew Theory. I'd been so focused on being seen as legitimate by Miles and Tasha's world that I'd forgotten the legitimacy I'd inherited, the one that couldn't be stolen because it lived in my bones. They'd taken my idea, but they'd never had my vision. And my vision was just getting started. 3 months into my Sunday pop-ups at Roots and Wings, I woke up to my phone buzzing with notifications. At first, I thought it was another spam wave, but when I opened TikTok, I realized something much bigger was happening. A wellness creator named @RealTalkWellness with 800K followers had posted a video that was already at 2.3 million views. The caption read, "Let's talk about wellness brands that profit off stolen indigenous and Black healing traditions thread time." My heart started racing as I watched her break down the Roots and Rituals campaign piece by piece. She'd done her research, comparing Tasha's recent posts about discovering ancient plant medicine with the actual history of turmeric in Ayurvedic practice, the traditional use of adaptogenic mushrooms in Chinese medicine, and the way these healing modalities had been practiced by communities of color for thousands of years before being repackaged for white wellness consumers. This blonde influencer is literally selling Nighttime Ritual Blend for $48 a bottle, she said, holding up her phone to show Tasha's Instagram, while the communities that developed these healing practices are still fighting for basic healthcare access. Make it make sense. The comments were brutal. Thousands of people sharing their own stories about seeing their cultural practices appropriated and sold back to them at premium prices. Indigenous creators talking about how their traditional medicines had been demonized for generations, only to become trendy when white wellness brands discovered them. Black herbalists pointing out the irony of turmeric being called a superfood discovery when their grandmothers had been using it for centuries. But the video that really made everything crumble was posted by @Seattle Service Worker, an account that exposed labor practices in the city's restaurant industry. They'd somehow gotten hold of internal Brew Theory emails and text messages that painted a picture of systematic exploitation that went far beyond what happened to me. The thread was devastating. Screenshots of Miles and Tasha discussing how to harvest ideas from creative employees without the liability of partnership. Text exchanges about identifying workers with authentic cultural knowledge they could leverage for brand development. Internal memos about creating fake customer complaints to justify firing employees who might later claim credit for their contributions. I wasn't the only one. The expose revealed that Brew Theory had a pattern of targeting employees from marginalized communities, encouraging them to share their cultural knowledge and family recipes, then systematically erasing their contributions while profiting from their expertise. There was Maria, a Honduran woman who developed their entire line of aguas frescas before being fired for attendance issues after her daughter got sick. James, a Black man who'd created their popular Urban Harvest sandwich series, let go during budget cuts right before the sandwiches became their best-selling lunch items. Even Jake, the afternoon shift manager I'd thought was part of their inner circle, had apparently been pushed out after suggesting they credit the employees whose recipes they'd appropriated. This isn't just cultural appropriation, @Seattle Service Worker wrote. This is economic exploitation disguised as collaboration. These companies are literally stealing from the communities they claim to celebrate. The backlash was swift and merciless. #BrewTheoryExposed started trending locally, then nationally. Food bloggers who'd initially praised the Roots and Rituals line published retractions and apologies. Whole Foods quietly pulled the products from their shelves. The wellness boutiques that had been promoting the drinks suddenly couldn't distance themselves fast enough. Tasha tried damage control with a rambling Instagram live session where she claimed she'd been honoring and celebrating traditional healing practices, not appropriating them. But every word she spoke seemed to dig the hole deeper. When someone in the comments asked her to name even one Black or Indigenous herbalist who'd influenced her work, She fumbled for answers, finally saying something about drawing inspiration from the collective wisdom of humanity. The internet ate her alive. Miles's response was even worse, a cold corporate statement about how Brew Theory had always followed proper legal procedures in product development and that they stood behind their intellectual property rights. No apologies, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just legal language that made them sound exactly like the extractive corporation they'd always pretended not to be. Within 2 weeks, Roots and Rituals was quietly discontinued. The Brew Theory Instagram account went dark. Several employees quit publicly, sharing their own stories of mistreatment and exploitation. The coffee shop was still technically open, but I heard from friends in the neighborhood that it was mostly empty, surviving on the loyalty of customers who either didn't know about the controversy or didn't care. But the most beautiful part of watching their empire crumble was seeing how it created space for authentic voices to rise. That's when Maya Rodriguez from the Healing and Community podcast reached out to me. She'd heard about my Sunday pop-ups through the Black Wellness Collective and wanted to feature my story as part of a series on reclaiming traditional medicine from corporate appropriation. "I want people to hear about the real work you're doing," she said during our pre-interview call. "Not just as a response to what happened to you, but as a model for how community-based healing can actually work." The podcast episode, titled Stolen Roots, Sacred Medicine, How One Woman Turned Betrayal into Community Healing, was released on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, it had been downloaded 50,000 times. By the following week, it was the #1 episode on Apple Podcasts' health and wellness category. I'd expected to talk about the theft of my recipes, about Miles and Tasha's betrayal, about the pain of seeing my grandmother's wisdom commodified and sold. But Maya's questions led me somewhere deeper, to talk about what authentic healing looked like, about the difference between extractive wellness and regenerative community care, about how the most powerful medicine wasn't something you could bottle and sell. "When someone steals your idea," I said toward the end of the interview, "they take your creation, but they can't take your purpose. They can copy your formula, but they can't replicate your why. And if your why is strong enough, if it's rooted deep enough, it will always grow back stronger than whatever shallow version they try to plant." That clip, "They can copy your formula, but they can't replicate your why," went viral across every platform. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. People started using it as a rallying cry for everyone who'd ever had their work stolen, their culture appropriated, their contributions erased. My phone started ringing with interview requests, collaboration offers, and invitations to speak at conferences. But more importantly, it started ringing with calls from other people who'd been exploited by wellness companies, asking for advice on how to reclaim their stolen work and build something authentic in its place. Watching Brew Theory fall apart felt less like revenge and more like justice. Not because I wanted to see them suffer, but because their collapse created space for the real healers, the authentic voices, the community-rooted work that had always been there, waiting for its moment to bloom. 1 year later, I stood in front of a building that used to house a check-cashing business in the Central District, holding the keys to what would become Earthblood Apothecary. The space was raw, concrete floors, exposed brick walls, windows that hadn't been cleaned in years, but I could see its potential the way I'd once seen healing in a handful of mushroom powder. The transformation took 6 months, and every penny I'd saved from the podcast interviews, speaking engagements, and grants I'd received after my story went viral. But more than money, it took a community. Aunt Jackie organized painting parties where neighbors showed up with brushes and stories. Keisha from the Black Wellness Collective connected me with local artists who created murals honoring traditional plant medicine from around the world. Marcus, my old customer from Brew Theory, who'd found his zen through my chill pill lattes, designed my logo for free, a tree with roots that looked like blood vessels, growing upward into branches that resembled neural networks. "Healing happens in connections," he explained when he showed me the design. "Roots to sky, earth to body, individual to community. That's what you do, Simone. You connect things." The cafe was designed to honor those connections. The main space flowed between a traditional coffee bar and an herbal apothecary, where customers could learn about adaptogens and medicinal plants through interactive displays that told the stories of their traditional uses. One wall featured a Wisdom Keepers gallery, Photos and quotes from elders in the community who'd shared their knowledge of plant medicine, including a large portrait of Mama Celia that brought tears to my eyes every time I walked past it. But Earth Blood was more than just a cafe. The back room hosted workshops on everything from basic herbalism to financial literacy for small business owners. We had a sliding scale payment system so that healing wasn't limited to people who could afford boutique wellness prices. Every Saturday, local healers offered free consultations to anyone who walked in. This isn't about selling products, I told the Seattle Times reporter who interviewed me the week before our grand opening. This is about rebuilding the village that colonization and capitalism tried to destroy. It's about remembering that healing was never meant to be a luxury good. Opening day arrived with the kind of nervous energy that makes your hands shake and your heart sing at the same time. I'd expected maybe 50 people throughout the day, friends, family, curious neighbors. Instead, I arrived at 6 a.m. to find a line that already wrapped around the block. There was Mrs. Chun, the woman whose brain fog I'd first helped clear at Brew Theory, holding a bouquet of flowers. Marcus, grinning with pride. A delegation from the Black Wellness Collective carrying a banner that read, "Healing is our birthright." College students from the University of Washington who'd heard about us through TikTok. Elderly folks from the neighborhood who remembered when this block was full of Black-owned businesses before gentrification pushed them out. But the moment that broke my heart wide open was when I saw James walking through the door, the man whose sandwich recipes had been stolen by Brew Theory before they fired him. He was carrying a manila folder and wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "Simone," he said, "I've been working on something since everything went down. A cookbook featuring all the recipes they stole from us and the stories behind them. Would you let me host the book launch here?" By noon, we'd served over 300 drinks. The Rooted Gold, my original formula, exactly as I'd created it, was flowing faster than I could make it. But people weren't just ordering drinks, they were staying. The cafe buzzed with conversations about healing practices, community organizing, and the kind of dreams that grow when people feel truly seen. Tasha showed up around 2 p.m. I spotted her through the window before she entered, looking uncertain and smaller than I remembered. Her wellness influencer aesthetic had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her Instagram-perfect confidence nowhere to be seen. When our eyes met across the crowded cafe, she approached the counter slowly, like she was walking through deep water. "Simone," she said quietly, "I know I don't deserve to be here, but I needed to see what you built. I needed to apologize." I studied her face, looking for the lie I'd learned to smell, but found only genuine remorse and something that looked like grief. "I lost everything," she continued. "My platform, my partnerships, my reputation. But worse than that, I lost myself. I became someone who could steal from you and sleep at night. Someone who could take your grandmother's wisdom and call it my own discovery." I handed her a cup of Rooted Gold, watching her eyes widen as she recognized the taste that had started it all. "The thing about healing," I said, "is that it's not conditional. It doesn't depend on whether someone deserves it. Your actions hurt me, hurt my community, hurt the integrity of traditional medicine. But that doesn't mean you can't heal from who you became." She started crying right there at my counter, surrounded by the community she'd tried to exploit and the healing practices she'd appropriated. Several customers moved closer, not to gawk, but to witness, because that's what real community does. It holds space for the messy, uncomfortable work of transformation. "I don't know how to make this right," she whispered. "You start by doing the work," I said. "Real work. Not for content, not for redemption, but because healing is a responsibility we all carry." That evening, after the last customer left and I'd finally locked the door, I sat alone in my cafe surrounded by the evidence of a dream made real. Empty cups bore the traces of golden tonics and herbal blends. The register showed numbers that would let me pay my staff well and keep the sliding scale prices accessible. Most importantly, the energy in the space still hummed with the kind of connection that happens when people gather around something true. I thought about the girl who'd stood behind the espresso machine at Brew Theory, desperate to be seen, willing to give away her most precious knowledge for a seat at someone else's table. She'd been so afraid of being invisible that she'd made herself disposable instead. But sitting in my own cafe, surrounded by the community I'd helped create and the healing traditions I'd helped preserve, I understood something that had taken me 27 years to learn. I was never meant to fit into their vision. I was born to build my own. They'd tried to erase me from my own story. Instead, they'd force me to write a better one. And this story, rooted in truth, nourished by community, growing toward a future where healing belongs to everyone, this story was just beginning.